This story starts right away with a tragedy. You could say so, with a car accident, because the main character is hit by a car that just didn't stop at a traffic light. It led to death. Well, as everyone says, white light, tunnel, basically nothing much. She felt like it was the end for her, but she thought so until one moment. As she closed her eyes there and opened her eyes here, she heard a male voice mockingly say, "Ha! Lady Rosaria!" It was a male voice that went on to say that she now had the nerve to barge into his bedroom. Anyway, she stopped and froze when she saw the beauty in front of her. Wait, no, it's a handsome man. She almost mistook him for a girl. She was, of course, a little shocked at what she saw. Is this really what life after death looks like? It's a bit vulgar, don't you think? The way the young man is lying in bed with the two girls. As she stood looking around the room, which was truly luxurious, and everything around her, the young man turned to her, saying that she didn't think she had gone overboard with her obsession. How a future crown princess, a role model for the rest of us, could descend to such a thing. It was just astonishing. The girl stood there and didn't understand who it was, what he was talking about, and he called her by a strange name. What's going on? For the first few minutes she had stood there feeling nothing. But now, for some reason, her right arm ached, whether from anger or something else. She clenched her fist until it hurt. When she lifted her hand and looked, she saw her nails digging into the palm of her hand, leaving bloody marks. And the man lying on the bed continued to be smart, saying that she would stay there. She realized clearly that she must have interrupted. He'd been having fun with those girls until she'd walked in here. The girl immediately realized that she had to leave. She turned around and went to the door so as not to disturb the guy's fun. But he wouldn't shut up for some reason and shouted after her, "If you run away, at least do it right. This is the last time I'll forgive something like this. You must remember that you are my fiancé." After saying that, she stopped. What did you think, fiancé? Is that what he's saying about her? She thought, wow, the bride, I mean her future fiancé, is having fun in bed with other girls. He laughed and added that he hadn't realized she wanted one too. Then she could join them. But he added that she should remember to kiss his feet first, before joining them. That's where it made her angry. The girl turned around and walked towards that huge bed where the guy and the girls were lying. She walked over, as if a little out of earshot of what he'd last said about the legs. But the guy was too smart, I guess. He laughed and said he didn't think she wanted to be around him so badly. That's where she couldn't stand it and yelled at him to shut his ugly mouth, slapping him. How could you even say that to a girl? Why would she suddenly kiss his feet? After that, all his beauties ran away screaming. The guy got a good slap that his lip even bled. He said, "For fuck's sake!" These words would not get out of her head. She screamed that she would refuse such a favor, and showed him an obscene gesture. But this gesture was relevant in modern life, in the one in which she had died, but not in the one in which she had fallen. She also added at the end to tell him to go to hell, the lustful scum. But now we can summarize the Duke of Rosary's mansion. She gave the heir to the throne a good thrashing, but thankfully without consequences. She was now heading to her father's mansion, as she didn't really recall where his room was. She decided to check with the maids, noticing that they were walking nearby. She called out, "Hey, wait, girls!" The ones who stopped said, "Ladies!" She asked them where her father was, and the maid said his lordship was in the study. That doesn't tell her anything yet. Is that why there were no repercussions? Because her father is the most powerful man in the land, and she's his only daughter. So my lady headed for her father's office. But because she wasn't really oriented yet, she went in the wrong direction. The maid said, "My lady, you must go to the second floor. The stairs are on the left." Milady turned to the maids, saying, "Thank you for the clue," and smiled at them. But only in the eyes of the maids did she look like a snake. Why was that? Because she also has a bad reputation. And so, let's get on with it. It had been exactly a week since she had been in this body, and now, at least, she had learned to walk properly, because then, in the first days, it was just a horror. At most, she was brought into her father's office, thrown on the carpet in front of his desk. Well, that's after she slapped that guy. It was hell for her, of course. It wasn't just for her, though. She saw her mom crying every day. She didn't even realize at that moment why she was in this place. But one thing was clear to her. Her new life could be taken away by her own father. It wasn't until she was locked in a room under the pretext of thinking about behavior that she realized the predicament she was in. First, this country is called Karaka, the largest empire on the continent. Its history stretches back almost 1,000 years. Well, and secondly, Duke Rosaria's family is one of those that were at the origins of the country. From it came the most outstanding swordsmen of the empire. Well, oh yes, and lastly, regarding this case, it belongs to the Crown Prince's only daughter and fiancée, Helena Rosaria, that is her. Wait, but that's not all. It's also the fictional world of the novel. She's very unlucky to be in this particular body. We'll explain everything in a moment. Helena Rosaria is a character in the novel The Lady with the White Rose, which she read on the advice of a friend from a past life. And not for nothing did everything seem familiar to her. She saw the plot for the second time. The main character, Rosetta, the very lady with the white rose, meets the protagonist, the Crown Prince. It was a story of overcoming adversity and great love. But she's the reason for all their misfortunes. She's basically the villain of the piece. That's a shame to hear. If you start remembering all the atrocities that the mistress of the body has inflicted on the heroine, floating wine or ruining her dress, that's not much. She even beat her occasionally. And the cherry on the cake. In the end, she poisoned her, though she survived. All in all, in a word, a whole detective story. That's kind of the reason why the prince blew her head off. It's kind of upsetting. Anyway, let's not talk about the bad stuff right now. The most important thing is that, judging by the fact that he does not care about his appearance, the main character has not yet appeared. That it's not time for Rosaria to become a real villain yet. So she still has time. And that's good now she knows exactly what to do. So at this moment she hurries to go to her father's office, because the girl has a plan already overdue, and need to survive. So when I knocked on my father's door, he let me in. Walking over to his desk, she said firmly, "Father, there was something she had to tell him. And to survive for that, she at least needs to get out of the love triangle." She didn't know at that second what her father's reaction would be. So she went on to say that she would like to break her engagement to the Crown Prince. That's when it began, Father. When he heard, he was shocked. He began to yell at her because she blew his brains out with this half-novka, and now she wants to cancel it. What completely lost her fear. Agreements with the imperial family is not so easy to tear up, she must understand it. While her father shouted at her, and she did not hope for an easy outcome in this situation, she understood what he said. Because it really will not be easy to do all this. But she has no reason to hurry now. It is very important what we'll say next. She thought for a moment that a high rank of power and great wealth was something she could not dream of in her past life. But who would not want to dream of such a thing? To enjoy it to the fullest, she thought of something and told her father. But it seems she was too hasty in her decision. Dad calmed down a bit after hearing those words and told her, okay, he suggested that she forget. She's always like that, she can go away. But why Elena agreed with her father because she had another idea and decided to tell her father right away. Without going off topic, she said make her only daughter his heir, very much wanted to take it all for herself and enjoy life. But no, she flew out of that office just a bullet, because her father naturally refused her. Well, Elena was a tough nut to crack. The next day she kept trying and it was the same thing. She just got kicked out of the office. And the day after that, and any day at all after all, she was allowed to approach the office at all. The girl was very angry. Sitting on the sofa in her room, she pondered the curse. Is it so hard to share a little money? Ah, how she would like to be an heiress. But she was not discouraged, and was still going to think of something else. After all, if she succeeded in inheriting the duchy, she would have to become someone else's wife, even after breaking the engagement, and that meant no freedom. She wouldn't want that. She was counting on him agreeing to make her only daughter his heir. Well, that didn't happen. Being a duchess is a big responsibility, not just a score. One mistake and she's finished, her father had explained to her. She remembered all his instructions and thought that if she continued like this, he might take her head off before the prince did. The girl was tired from so many thoughts and lay down on the sofa, resting her head on the cushion. She thought, well, it was unlikely that her father would agree, unless he went completely crazy. Even though she's not the real Elena, but with her body comes a terrible reputation, too hasty. Closing her eyes, she felt a little disappointed, but it was not in her character, not her character from that life, for she had taken him with her. Elena opened her eyes and said, "Wait a minute, I need to think this through." She sat back down on the couch and began to remember the plot of this novel. She remembered exactly that she wasn't going to marry the prince anytime soon. The protagonists met as when it was snowy winter outside the window. Well, if you look out the window now, it's spring and everything is just blooming. That means she's got time. And she knew firmly that she had only to become heiress to the ducal family and break her engagement before winter. That's what she knew she would do. There was a knock on the door in the room. The girl said, "Come in." When the doors opened, she saw her mother and said in a surprised voice, "Mom." It was very unexpected for the girl that her mother had not even warned her. A woman, Elena's mother, Elizabeth Tesar Rosaria, entered the room. When she entered, the woman had a frightened look. She looked like she was afraid of something. She was very anxious. The woman walked into the room, sat down on the couch opposite her daughter, looking at her and remaining silent. Elena asked, "What brings her here, mother?" Taking a cup of tea in her hands. Even Elena noticed that her mom was so afraid of something that she was shaking. Elena thought and said just at random the first phrase that came to her mother's mind. She wouldn't tip her cup of tea over on her again. And Elizabeth, her mother, spoke the truth in a worried voice. Elena bit down on a strand of her hair. She'd said it at random. Did the real heroine really do that? Mom was unable to speak for a long time, but finally, with great effort, she squeezed out a few phrases. She said, "They say Elena comes to see Daddy every day, so she thought she'd wonder why she does." Elena replied, "Yes, she feels like giving up her engagement to the prince because of that incident." Elizabeth became indignant. "How do you say no?" Elena said, "Yes, but that's not all." The girl went on to say that she wanted to become the heiress of the family. She spoke with confidence. This and a firm gaze. What's not to say at that moment about her mother? She stuttered when she heard it. First she said e, then p. Then she barely got out the word heiress. Elena thought, well, it's understandable that it's so unexpected, but not to this extent. Then the mother grabbed a cup of water on the table out of anxiety and began to drink very quickly. She was so worried that she was sweating a little, and drops of sweat rolled down from her forehead. When Mother had drunk the entire cup of water, she set it on the table and told Elena to explain why she was so determined to give up the engagement. Elena said one word. Simple. Elena looked at her mother and saw that her hands were shaking with fear, but she still wanted to listen to her daughter. Elena wondered if she should try to persuade her mother. She said that she doesn't really fully understand what made her so obsessed with this crown prince. Also, she keeps thinking about that incident when she was alone in the room. She's had plenty of time to think about it. Mother asked, "And what does she think?" Elena replied that the crown prince was real trash. She had a look of indifference and even probably a little horrified when she said that. Well, and then Elena went ballistic. She started just screaming about how she was like the whole time the girl was waving her arms around, talk about how he couldn't even be called human. How can you act like that in front of your own fiancé? He was just a scoundrel, a pile of rot that not even flies would sit on. She didn't understand how he could be the heir to the throne. He'd only ruin the empire. As Elena screamed, her mother tried to say something, to stop her saying Elena, but it didn't help. Elena wasn't expressing herself very well about the prince. She was talking about how the prince wasn't just a marasmus. She wanted to continue, but her mother jumped up and covered her mouth with her hands. She admonished, though very afraid when she spoke, "Helena, watch your words well." The woman said the same thing, crying because she was afraid of what she might get from her own daughter. She told Elena that she was too worried, and there was no need to be like that. Then Elena, after calming down a bit, said that it might not be possible to break the engagement now, But she didn't want to become the crown prince's wife. And that was the end of it. Helen took her mother's hands and told her that she wished from the bottom of her heart that she could follow in her father's footsteps. She would like to help their family and delve into all matters so as not to dishonor the clan. Elena said it so sincerely to her mother that she believed it and said that she had really changed. She even had a smile on her face, because when Mother came into the room, she was blacker than a cloud. Finally, they both calmed down and her mother said okay. She would believe her, but she had to promise her something. Elena smiled at her mother and thought, finally got it. Although it was really sincere, she replied, yes, of course, Mother, anything. And Mother began to tell her that she must never give up. Whatever happens, and not to throw away books anymore, even if she doesn't understand them, and not to burn them, not to drop her shoes while learning to dance if her feet hurt, and to promise her not to call her mentor names. Elena said to all this, very well, Mother. Finally, the woman had tears in her eyes. She said very sadly that her daughter should not send her out of the room again. She smiled and promised her that it would never happen again. Mother must trust her. She sincerely wants the best for everyone. Elizabeth smiled and replied, well, the woman felt better and my tears disappeared and my mood lifted. They rushed to the father's office because the mother believed her daughter in her changed character. They went straight to the father's study. Elena thought that she would have to wait at least a little bit and for his heavy character, but she did not even expect that she would be told by my lady for the sake of informing that today she begins to undergo lectures on the preparation of the heiress for her. It was a shock, just 2 words so quickly. Her life began to surround her with history lessons, ballroom dancing. Devotee worked hard, and every day and even fencing lessons where she was noticed by young men who were also taking the same lessons. One of the guys shouted about her being a real genius talent master swordsman. Exactly, he tells her. Elena shyly replied, oh okay, wiping a towel under her face after practice. But this guy said she was born to do fencing. He'd noticed it when he'd first met her. She was a little weak among her peers, but she had the rest of his lordship's muscles. While Guy was telling him all this, Elena was about to leave, and he shouted to her, my lady, wait where she was going. Elena turned and said she didn't like the heat and the constant training, so she wasn't planning to become a sword master. She had other things to do, and she had to go. She thanked him because he did a good job, sir. The guy who trained her named Diol shouted out, if you suddenly change your mind, then come see them anytime. They would always be happy to wait for her. Elena from fencing. Walking down the hallway, she reasoned, thinking about how it seemed that after her mother's help, her plan had gone smoothly. But was it really that necessary? After all, during their first family dinner, she almost got into a fight with her father. Hearing the line about Elena picking up a sword and fighting, and these words came from her mom, she was shocked. She asked seriously, how could she ever beat her father? She would have gone to the grave after that dinner. It was clear to her that the most powerful person in the family was her mother. When Elena came to the tea room after fencing to have some tea, her mother was sitting there singing tea. She asked excitedly, Elena, is she from training? Elena answered her, yes, Mom. But suddenly Elizabeth shouted, no, call her Mommy! Elena, crouched on the couch, realized that she had probably started this whole thing for nothing. Elizabeth repeated, come on, come on, come on, say Mommy, Mommy. Elena realized it was best not to argue and say it the way she wanted to. She said with a smile, Mommy. Elizabeth exclaimed, that's it, Elena's a smart girl. Helena realized that, okay, that would do. She would be called Mommy by now. It was better for her not to know the details of her relationship with the Duke. At that very moment, there was a knock on the door in the Duke's room. Father said, come in. Woolston Duke, second son of Count Duke, entered the room. The successor to the position of mentor to the imperial families. Elena's current mentor. He was a young man with glasses. Walking in the study, reaching his desk, he heard a question from Elena's father. How did she behave today? The guy answered, as usual, just fine. She was able to get through the material much faster than he expected. In the next class, review the list of things an heir should know. Anyway, while the guy was rasping, the Duke continued to write some documents and somehow didn't really admire the fact that his daughter was reaching the heights with such speed. Helena's mentor, of course, tried to influence this situation somehow and asked, "Your Excellency, can he say a few words?" The Duke said, "Speak." Then the guy started to say that he doesn't know exactly how high his expectations are regarding Milady. It seems to him that she would be perfectly suited to be the heiress of the ducal family. The Duke said that the lad was too hasty with such a generous assessment for a maiden who had just finished learning the basics. But her mentor insisted that she had an amazing grasp of the material. She also had an understanding of how to put it into practice. Sometimes he notices that she says things that he doesn't always understand with his knowledge. But most of all, he appreciates the young lady's effort. So the mentor would like to ask the Duke not to ignore them, but to take a little closer look. This story introduces us to another character, also very important. He is a young guy, but at the moment he is lying in bed unconscious, with his mentor Dane sitting beside him. Mentor Dane is very upset. He sits and wails. "Your Highness, there is a young boy on the bed with his head bandaged. He's unconscious at the moment, but he's breathing." As a miracle suddenly happened, the guy started to open his eyes, squinting. He saw the room in front of him and heard a shouting guy yelling, "Your Highness! Prince!" Lloyd grabbed his head because his head was splitting with pain. He asked the guy to shut up so he wouldn't yell like that. Mentor Dane covered his mouth with both hands and didn't utter a sound so as not to disturb the prince. The boy sat down on the bed and began to cough. Day cried out, "Your Highness! He must not make any sudden movements." The prince turned his head to this man named Dane and asked him to stop yelling like that. His head was splitting. Could he speak calmly? Then the prince asked who he was and what this place was. The preceptor became very much alarmed. He said, "Pardon me, what is it about, Your Highness?" Dane leaned toward him and said, "Doesn't he remember him?" "It's him, isn't it, Dane? Look closer." The prince looked at the boy and thought he needed to remember what had happened before. He didn't have a memory. After sitting for a couple minutes, he began to remember something of what had happened. He remembered exactly that he was celebrating with his brother in his room, drinking wine. As the prince tilted his head, he realized that he had hair hanging down his face. When he touched it with his hands, he realized that it was long, and hair that fast couldn't grow back in a couple of weeks. What scared him was why they were so long. Questions. Wait, how long was he unconscious? The prince shouted, "A mirror now! Get him a mirror!" Dane said, "Okay, wait a bit," and rushed to get the mirror. Returning with a mirror, the guy said, "Here, look." Then the prince saw himself in the reflection with a bandaged head and long hair. He looked at himself and said that his hands even began to shake from worry. He thought, "Do they really want to say that he is the emperor's son?" Turning to the guy, asking him what his name was, the guy replied, "Your Highness, his name is Dane. He really forgot." The prince said that judging from his wounds, he had badly injured his head, so he asks that Dane explain to him what happened to him. Dane took a chair, sat down, and began to talk about how he had a small conflict with his younger brother, His Highness, the Crown Prince. Next, he fell down the stairs and ended up in such a state. Probably, if the imperial physician had been more active in treating you, your memory wouldn't have been so badly affected. The prince hesitated. Though he was the eldest son, he was not the heir. Apparently, he was not a good man. The next morning, the Duke's voice sounded in the Rosary Mansion. He was calling for his daughter Elena, and when she turned around, she saw that the whole family was behind her. She immediately thought that something was wrong, because her father never addressed her first. She walked up to them and asked, "What's wrong?" Her father said she had to clean herself up because she was going to the castle. Elena said in surprise, "What's he talking about? Why would she go to the castle?" The Duke explained, "Don't tell me that the future heiress of the duchy is not going to present herself to the emperor." The nearby Mother Elizabeth, who was standing nearby, was ecstatic when she heard this, for it was a great honor for the family. She ran up to Elena, grabbed her hands and said, at last, they will meet the emperor." After everyone was gathered and reached the emperor, they were introduced to the great hall where the emperor sat on his throne. The Duke, along with Helena, said that they were pleased to welcome His Majesty, the great emperor, Rorian Karthik, the current ruler of the Karthik Empire. The emperor, seeing the duke, laughed and said, "Herzak, how are you? Relax, they don't need these greetings." Elena, as she bowed, thought, "What a lively character he has, not at all like a prince." The emperor asked the duke the reason he had come to see him with his daughter. The duke rose and said, "The fact is that they have chosen and wanted to introduce the heir to the duchy." The emperor jumped up from his throne. He shouted, "Oh ho! At last! Who is the lucky one?" Smiling, the emperor said, "Don't tell me it's—" And the duke interrupted him, saying, "This way. That's right, your majesty." His daughter, Elena Rosaria, would be the heir. There was only one question. What? After this news, naturally, the emperor was simply stunned. "Well, that's so, they say in this life," Helena would have said in her past life, that he was just stunned. The emperor asked the duke, "Does he want to give up this country?" But the duke replied, "Absolutely not." Then the emperor said to Helena, "Why don't she visit her wife?" After all, it had been so long since they had seen each other, and the girl realized that she just had to go. She was even a little pleased at the way the emperor stammered and trembled at this news. Helena went out to stroll through the garden of the imperial palace, as well as to get some air and just think, because it was all clear to her exactly what the emperor was going to say after he escorted her out, so that once again the duke will think carefully about the heir. But even he can't make a difference in matters of noble heirs. Elena knew her father wouldn't change his mind if he'd already made it, not until her mom intervened, and her task now is to settle the matter of the betrothal herself. Just as the maid was on her way to the meeting, Elena said, "Hey, wait!" The girl walked up to her and asked, "Yes, miss?" and called her Elena. She answered, "Yes, where is the prince's heir's palace?" The maid pointed with her hand and said, "You can go straight down this road." Then Helena screamed, and the maid was very frightened. She became upset and began to cry. "But it is true, miss," she said. Elena thought to herself as she almost walked to the scum's chambers. What a nightmare. And the girl immediately turned the other way, when she had no idea yet that she was trying to avoid the crown prince, but would meet another. She changed her mind for some reason. No contact with him now. The mood was gone. She'd better get as far away from the palace as possible, and the girl walked into the garden. Looking around, she thought, "Where is she?" I realized that it wasn't like the imperial garden. It was too small and unremarkable. But there were trees and flowers here too, and on top of that, it was immediately obvious that he was well taken care of. There was not the slightest flaw. He was small and modest, but he was beautiful. In the garden, Elena was enjoying the beauty in silence, when suddenly she heard a man's voice saying, "Who is here?" The girl turned around and saw a guy. The young man asked how dare she come here without permission. When Elena came closer and took a closer look, she noticed the cold blue eyes and black hair. It was him. She bowed and said, "It is good to see you, your highness, the first prince." The girl said she was the daughter of the Duke of Rosaria, Elena Rosaria. Elena realized he didn't recognize her, though one could count on one's fingers how many times the weak first prince had appeared at banquets. The guy started apologizing right away. He said, "I'm sorry, I didn't even realize it was her at first." Elena replied, "It's okay, don't apologize." After all, she was the one who had barged into his garden without asking and unwittingly interfered with his walk. The guy smiled and said, "Yes, perhaps, but if you were looking for the crown prince's palace, it's in the other direction." Elena explained that she had never been here before and had gotten lost by pure chance. The garden was so beautiful that she admired it. The girl asked, "It must have been decorated according to his preferences, but it's very pretty." The prince looked around and said, "I guess he didn't give it a second thought." Then the guy smiled and offered to have a cup of tea because it seemed to him that this meeting was not a coincidence. After the prince suggested a cup of tea, Elena became wary. She realized that something was wrong. She said, "Thank you for the offer, but she came with her father and it's time for her to go back." "That's too bad." The first prince said, "There is nothing to apologize for here. They are bound to meet again in the future." Waving his hand, he wished, "Have a good journey," and left. Elena looked after him and was a little surprised at the situation, but she rushed back to her father. She knew that the first prince from the novel was a shy, quiet man who was constantly yelled at by the crown prince. He had only spoken to the protagonist at the very end, but now he was acting quiet and even dismissive. This prince is nothing like him. A man with the face of the first prince that acts completely different. Who is he? When Elena left, Lloyd whistled for Dane to climb out of the bushes. The prince said, "Something doesn't really match his story." "How come, Dan?" He said, "Yeah, she really doesn't seem like herself." There were rumors that the Duke's daughter had changed so much, it was as if she had become a different person. It seems they were right. The prince asked indignantly what that even meant. Dane tried to explain as if to say, His Highness struck first and then the rumors started. It's as if she was switched. They say that after that incident, she started practicing to become an heiress. And from what they've seen now, she's changed a lot. The prince thought for a moment. Very much like him. Just like him. A different person, he says. How interesting. In the evening, when Helena returned to her room, she began to tell her maid all that had happened to her. The maid said in a very surprised voice that she had seen with His Highness the first prince. Elena said, "Yeah, he's not like the person she used to know. He's kind of changed a little bit." The maid shouted, "Does she mean to say that the first prince has come to his senses?" Elena asked what she meant, and the maid began to tell about, doesn't she know, His Highness fell down the stairs during an argument with the crown prince and didn't regain consciousness for over 2 weeks. A lot of people thought he wouldn't wake up at all. Apparently the worst was avoided. Elena thought oddly. The incident couldn't wake up, but he woke up and acted like a different person. And then it came to her. No way. Elena looked at herself in the mirror and thought, what on earth is she thinking? Such a rare occurrence couldn't have happened twice in a row. But she's not completely ruling out the possibility. We need to find out the details. The next, so beautifully sunny day, Elena had to spend it a full 2 hours with the subhuman. Since the Emperor's order apparently wants to influence her to give up her place as the Duke's heir, you couldn't be worse, you bloody old man. All Elena did was keep yanking the butler around, asking, "How long does she have left to sit?" The second prince turned to her and said that he didn't know she was so insatiable. Elena looked at him and wondered what he'd come up with this time. He told her that isn't it enough just to be close to him. Also about the duchy thinking he was special and outstanding. Does she think it's because she's near me? No, it's because of her kind, or there would be no engagement. Though the prince added that if the family was powerful, why not seize the moment? Just sit back and enjoy it. Don't even think about shaking the empire with the news that she will become the heiress of the duchy. The prince kept explaining to her that she would be his wife, could bathe in luxury, and wouldn't have to do anything. Elena answered him that he was right. Taking a cup of tea, she took a sip. The prince thought, what the hell, she agreed with him, something's not right here. Elena set the cup down and said that she was pretty greedy, so she would get what she wanted and didn't care if it was a crown prince or a duchy. She said, however, that she was a little overzealous. She's not good enough to hold 2 things at once, and she's going to have to give up something. The prince smiled and said, "Good. Sometimes she can think straight, you just have to try harder." Helena proudly said she would give up the engagement. They should break it off. And then she added that he wanted it too. Elena thought that maybe she should have talked about it later, but now was as good a time as any. Who knows? Maybe we can talk him down and break off the engagement quietly. Looking at the prince, she thought, it's unlikely that the crown prince wants to see her in the place of the heiress, but he doesn't want to see her as the crown princess even more. So the girl was really expecting him to say now agree, and then she would just be ruled. But a completely different answer followed. The prince yelled at her, she said. The girl remained silent, so he yelled once more. He wondered what she had just yelled at him. The prince was angry. Scary, he yelled, bouncing on her. Helena looked at him and replied that she wished she could give up her engagement to His Highness. She had thought before that it was because she was always hanging around. That's why she's reconsidered her attitude and decided to distance herself from the prince. Because he hates her so much. The prince pounded his fist on the table and said he couldn't believe she had said that as soon as she dared to stammer such a thing. If his honor was so concerned, she should give up her place as heiress, not princess. Elena said, his honor and her honor doesn't interest him? To her, What she had seen on the first day was enough to trample her dignity and pride. She explained to him that if he's so worried, he can put all the blame for the breakup on her. She's sure that if he didn't, he would. But the prince became furious in general. He jumped up from the couch and started yelling at her. Elena honestly doesn't quite understand what he's so angry about. She explained that hadn't His Highness despised her all this time, and it seemed that he would gladly accept if only offered. The prince shouted that she was talking nonsense. A butler came into the room and said, apologizing, but 2 hours had passed. The prince stood up and said he had to go. The boy walked towards the exit. Elena, with him without agreeing, said that Your Highness, wait, they are not finished yet. She finally managed to say in a calm voice that he should just agree to break the engagement. But the prince turned and only barked at her that time was up. He'd spent 2 hours with her on the Emperor's orders, and there was nothing more for him to do here. Elena wondered how long it had been since he'd been punctual. The prince just got up and left, slamming the door behind him. She stood there wondering what it was, just taking off without answering. It's not what she expected. He'd shown her he hated her. He was against the engagement, and now this. Honestly, she thought he'd be jumping for joy if he gave up the princess seat. After all, it would be much easier to force him to give up the heiress's seat than his wife's. The girl sat on the sofa and wondered what was wrong with him that made him not want to. What kind of problems he might have in general. Suddenly an idea popped into Elena's head. Could it be the 3 clichés of Korean doramas? What does it mean? The first cliché is when the first girl who hits him. His thoughts are that no one has ever done that to him before. Second cliché. How could she hate him? Love. Ready to buy it with any money. His thoughts are that he likes girls like that. And the third cliché is when he realized the feelings when she told him she hated him. His thoughts that he couldn't stop loving her. Anyway, Elena thought, it's not like anything like this is going to happen. She can't even imagine it. Ha! She's so pissed off about this. When she got home, she started her classes. But they ended much earlier today. Mentor Duke had told her that they would end classes for the day then. Elena asked why the hell not. Then yelled at Duke that no, that's not what she meant. She tried to stop the guy, yelling, wait, it's not that. It's not at all what he thought. She was just minding her own business. But Duke closed the book, slammed it shut and said, never mind, she's in no condition to continue studying. The guy said, that's it for today. Slamming the door, he left. Elena stayed in the room and was very angry about the damn prince. She's got nothing but trouble. The next day, Elena was told by her maids that she had received a letter saying that she had been invited to the palace. Elena wondered who it was. The maid, holding the letter of invitation in her hand, said, His Highness, the first prince. The girl took the letter in her hands, opened the envelope, and began to read. She thought he hadn't been joking about the tea then. His words said that there was nothing to apologize for here. They were sure to meet again in the future. Have a good trip. The letter said that he would like to invite my lady to the palace. The girl thought that he really didn't look like the prince she knew. The maid asked, Are you not, my lady, friends with His Highness, the first prince? But Helena said, No, I would not say so. We have seen each other once, and that only in passing. They are not friends, not even comrades. Very strange of him to invite the fiancée of a brother with whom he has a bad relationship. Elena went back to her office and decided to read a short description of the characters from the novel, to remember the character of each. She'd written it all down in the early days. She remembers most of the nuances of this world, so it was fine not to write it down. But who knows, she might forget something. Better to keep everything on paper, even if it doesn't help. Only now does she realize the problem. The details of the affair have changed. Until recently, the changes only occurred when she changed her behavior. But why did he so abruptly become the other first prize? Could it have something to do with the incident he had experienced? Or maybe worse, had he become like her? If her suspicion was correct, he might have noticed something strange about her too. Elena decided that no matter how much she thought about it, she wouldn't find the answer. She had to act. She had to figure out if the prince had changed, only because of the incident, or because someone had possessed him. So first, She would respond to the invitation by writing him back. In the end, they didn't meet until 2 days later. As Elena was getting ready, and then her mother came into her room saying, "Elena, doesn't she want to have fun with her favorite mommy?" Elena turned and said, "Oh, Mommy, come in." At which point she was just getting dressed up. Mother asked if she was going somewhere, and Helena replied, "Yes, we have to go to a place." After hearing these words, Elizabeth became upset, saying, "That's how it is." And she brought cookies to eat with her. Indeed, Elizabeth had a basket of bunny-shaped cookies in her hands. Elena saw it and laughed at how corny it was. Her mom said she only had to look, not so much like her. Elena noticed that now Mama loved her so much that she was the best daughter in the world, but she was just a child to whom she couldn't show her love. Not to disappoint her mommy, Elena took one cookie. The girl started eating and saying that she would try not to be late, and then they would be sure to spend time together, Mommy. Elizabeth, from hearing the words and seeing the cookies eaten, screamed the truth. Then she would look forward to it. Elena knew to deal with the general, you have to deal with his horse first. But that doesn't mean Mommy is a horse. After her persuasion, Daddy almost stopped fighting with her. Of course, he was sometimes angry because of his bad temper or just because, but at times like this, Mom's always tried to protect her. Now she's starting to feel it. Elena even thought for a minute that she was her real mom. Elizabeth's mom, Elena, asked, so where she was going. Elena said the Imperial Palace. Elizabeth, when she heard, tore the bunny cookie in half that was in her hand. She said she was going to the palace. Elena noticed something was wrong with her mom. She was upset and unhappy about it. So she immediately hurriedly explained, "Mommy, she misunderstood. She's not going to see the crown prince." Mother calmed down and asked again, "But then why would she go to the palace?" And Elena proudly replied, "She's meeting her first prince." After much packing and talking to her mother, Elena finally arrived at the palace. She was immediately greeted by the first prince himself. He said, "It's good to see you, Lady Rosaria. Come in, don't be shy." He began immediately showering her with compliments about how especially beautiful she was today. Elena replied in the same vein, "Thank you so much for the compliment. She's flattered." Elena herself realized that was what she had expected to hear. In fact, she didn't just decide to dress up for no reason. She did it to see if the prince was real. It's someone else. There's less and less doubt. That prince would have fallen off his feet from the shock. The prince said he was grateful that she had agreed to come. Elena replied that she was honored. She wouldn't say no to anything. Prince Lloyd said, "She's a flatterer." Elena thought, what did he expect? I mean, it's not like he's going to be rude from the get-go. Let's see what happens next. The prince decided to say what he had heard. "She has become heir to the duchy. Accept his congratulations." Elena replied that she is most grateful, Your Highness. He continued the conversation, asking her, "And how is that girl?" She said she doesn't even know. Right now she just hopes she doesn't cause trouble for the empire and family. Elena took a cup of tea to drink and thought that it's all come down to useless dialogue. It would have been easier for her if he'd shown himself to be real. The prince told her not to worry. She would definitely help the empire. And Len and Elena realized that, apparently, he wasn't going to reveal his true identity just yet. So she decides to make a move, you know? She's been meaning to for a long time, but she's been hesitant to say it. She feels like he's changed a lot. The prince replied, "Oh, really?" Then Elena continued. She said, "Yeah, he's nothing like anyone she's ever dated before." The prince asked in surprise, "Before? And which earlier are you talking about?" "My lady," she said. "My lady?" Then Elena had already lost her pen. "Well, mentally. Well, if you're so interested, she said they had seen each other before their previous meetings." The prince sat back in his chair, said he really was very interested, and it seemed to be true. Elena was surprised that he would say such a thing so easily. But the prince didn't stay silent either. He immediately said that he had heard it too, as if she had become a different person. Elena looked at him, squinting her eyes. Yeah, he's turning the tables. Then she put down her cup of tea and said, "Does he? What does he think? She's changed a lot." Then the prince said she knew better. She was still the same to him. The girl said, "Well, she's at least gotten smarter, and it's a little embarrassing that it's only now being talked about." When the prince heard her answer, he said, "Cleverer. That could be said of her too. Could it not, my lady?" Elena replied, "True, in your middle name." The girl stood up and said, "You know, she's gotta go." The guy asked, "Leaving already?" She said, "Yeah, I have other things to do. You don't have to see her off." Then she added, "Oh, I completely forgot. She cooked something. It's nothing fancy, but I hope he likes it." Her maid baked the cookies, and believe me, they're delicious. Helena was holding a basket covered with a small piece of cloth and wrapped with a beautiful red ribbon. Prince waved his finger for his assistant Dane to go over and get that basket. The boy said the cookies just as he wanted something to snack on. So nice of her. As soon as Elena left, the prince immediately said, "Cookie! What the hell?" But he saw a note in the basket. He yelled, "Give it to me!" Dane said, "Your Highness, be careful." Dane saw the look on the prince's face and asked, "Your Highness, is something wrong? Did people write something offensive?" The prince smiled and laughed, then said, "Which is hard to say yet." The prince, taking the paper, thought, "Yes, nothing is clear yet. Not even the younger brother he thought was the closest person ended up finishing him off to gain power. It's not decided if they will become allies." He clearly realized that they were both from another world, and it was unclear why she had come, and extremely strange that she had left quickly. He doesn't know if it's boldness or recklessness, but it's clearly unusual. And the note said, "Who is he?" He was curious to see what her intentions were. He wondered what her intentions were. Whether or not her existence would be an obstacle to his plan, or a blessing. It had been several days since Elena had given the message to the first prince. She kept waiting for some kind of response from him, or action. She thought, maybe I should have written something else. She thought he would try to contact her right away, but it had been over 3 days. Maybe she was too impatient. Maybe she should wait at least a month. Elena pondered that if he didn't answer after that, she was wrong to just leave it at that. Suddenly, out of the blue, a maid came in and said, "My lady, you have a letter." Elena immediately became nervous, jumped up from her chair, shouted to the maid to give the letter quickly, and asked, "Who is it from?" The maid said, "Were you expecting news from someone, miss?" Elena smiled back, because she realized that this was the letter she had been waiting for. When she opened the letter, she exclaimed, "My God!" The maid immediately asked, "Is this exactly what you wanted?" And Elena said, "Not exactly, but still good news." Helena told the maid to bring a quill and perfume as soon as possible. I must write a reply as soon as possible. She had decided to join one of the tea parties a few days ago to see how things were in high society. Also, more rumors might pop up if she didn't go anywhere. Well, it looked a little different than she'd imagined. The girls were sitting at tables and just gossiping. They didn't look like regular high school girls from her past life. They acted like normal high school girls. Elena casually clapped her fan, and the girl sitting across from her asked, "Lydia Rosaria, is there anything she doesn't like?" Elena replied, No, nothing like that. On the contrary, it's been a long time since she's been to a meeting like this. She's very happy to be here." The girl decided to ask, "All right then, maybe you can share something with them?" Elena realized, right, now we can at least change the subject. She began to tell them that, frankly, she has long wanted to discuss the situation on the continent, or where the Empire's policies will be headed. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts, ladies, on the matter. Elena looked at the girls and realized there was zero reaction. Then she said, "Or would you like to talk about the main topics of this year, like rebuilding the territories affected by last year's famine?" But the girls also did not weed any initiative. Then Elena was not discouraged and said she was still pondering, should we relax the tax laws a little bit for indigenous people? Maybe they have some ideas. And besides, winter's about to rise. And she looked at the girls again. But again there was no reaction, and she realized she needed to change the subject. Then she said, "Oh, you know, a new dessert store opened up in our territories. A lot of people say it's pretty good." This question interested the girls, or rather the subject. They all paid attention to her at once and stared at her with puzzled eyes. Elena looked at the girls lit up, and she exhaled. She thought, okay, I need to work on fixing my reputation first. Suddenly another lady came to their table. She said, "Excuse me." Elena looked at her and thought, who the hell is that? The girl bowed and said, "Good afternoon, Lady Rosaria. My name is Bella Sadargi. I heard that Elena has become heir to the duchy. Congratulations." Elena looked at this girl. It seemed to her that she was sincere in saying those words, as if she was really happy for her. I wonder if she meant it or not. Elena laughed and said, "Looks like it turns out it's nice to hear congratulations from more than just family. Thank you very much, Lady Sadargi." After this lady came up and congratulated Elena. Then all the others realized that they should also say words of congratulations and started talking out of the blue. Who will be the first to say that they congratulate her? They are very happy for her. Elena laughed. She felt uncomfortable. She said, "Really, thank you all so much. She appreciates it." Suddenly, a lady approached their table and said that she too would like to congratulate Lady Elena on this wonderful occasion. Elena turned and saw that, oh, there she was. Elena immediately began to remember how it was written in the novel, line for line. Rosetta's face contorted from the sharp blow. Quietly, "Be quiet for your own good, Lady Rosetta. They don't want anyone coming in here, do they?" said Lady Tennessee. The slap that landed on her cheek silenced her in an instant. Beautiful lips curved in a smile, but the face read intense malice. Rosetta begged them to stop. "Please." Elena's red lips curved up at the sight of Rosetta. She took her hand to Rosetta's chin and turned her face, saying, "Look at her. And so inheriting in the blood of the Marquis, she is the closest thing to an assistant." Though now, Elena thought it was more accurate to say she was hers. She's always looking down on everyone. A real predator. Needless to say, everyone did her bidding until Elena showed up. Miss Tennessee said she would like to apologize for congratulating her only now, Lady Rosaria. Smiling, Miss said that it had been so long since they had seen each other. She was still hesitant to say it, as she knows she's a little shy. She hopes Miss Rosaria will forgive her. Elena thought, yeah, shy. She ridiculously decided to show up because all the attention had shifted to her. Elena is ruled by rabbits without a tiger. She's not happy that her spot's been stolen, and she's hoping Elena will say as if everything's fine. Apparently, from the outside, Elena looked amused, but she would always find time for a lesson. So she said, "Of course she forgives her, Lady Tennessee." Lady Tennessee had a question in her eyes. She hadn't expected Elena to answer like that. Elena repeated, "She says she forgives her for ignoring her and not approaching her sooner." And Miss Tennessee thought that was not at all what she wanted to hear from Helena. But Elena didn't stop. She continued to explain further. You know, she even got upset. Their relationship had been a little strained lately. That's why she wanted so badly to be the one to congratulate her first, not Tennessee. But she didn't do anything, because she didn't dare approach. She thought about the fact that she'd never seen Elena talk to anyone like that. Helena took Miss Chadargi's hand and said that hearing Lady Chadargi's congratulations had taken everything away. She was glad she'd come here. "Thank you, ladies." I was touched and said, "Oh, she's so glad I could cheer her up and get her out of her head." Not standing in the background with Tennessee, at this point she was clenching her fists, so to speak, until they bled. Besides, she had to say something in response to all this, and she said she was very sorry for the way things had turned out. She didn't want to upset Miss Rosaria at all. Elena smiled and replied, Yes, of course she does." She thought, and how to dislike this awkward position now. And she thought that Elena would know how long it took her to gain authority among the nobility. She thinks she's just going to take everything away from her. She'll see. That's why Lady Tennessee wouldn't leave Elena alone. Now she had to get her revenge. The girl said, "Speaking of which, Lady Elena, it's been so long since she's been to the meetings that she was even starting to worry. Has something happened? It's probably none of her business, but why is she missing?" Elena thought, well, how mean to try to attack a person and pretend to care. Everyone already knows, and rumors. What is she trying to accomplish? Okay, we have to play along. Elena said, No big deal, just diving headfirst into her studies to become an heiress. Lady Tennessee clapped her hands, saying, "Wow, I see. Why hasn't anything been written? She was so worried about her. There were so many slim rumors going around while she was gone." The ladies at the table began to look at each other and whisper, "She's not going to talk about it here. That's so low of her." A Lady Tennessee went on to explain that she certainly didn't believe the rumors, but when people started saying that the young lady was crazy, Helena screamed, "Wait! Did she really bring that up on purpose?" And Lady Tennessee said, "What? Doesn't know what it's about, Elena?" Elena tried to explain, "So why ruin the other girl's tea party with such nonsense? Or was she just mistaken or maybe on purpose after all?" Elena thought she was mocking her because she was afraid to attack her head-on. Elena wondered, so this was how she had decided to bring her down. And what would she do now? Would she say it was a mistake? Would she change? Her position among the nobility was shaken anyway. There was a girl sitting next to Lady Tennessee. She said that perhaps Lady Tennessee had made a mistake. She thought she should change in front of Lady Rosaria. And the rest of the people at that table started backing up too and saying their opinion that it was too much. She should apologize. She should apologize. Rumors are rumors, but this was clearly not the most appropriate topic of discussion for a tea party. Lady Tennessee has behaved too indelicately. Still repeating all the indignation of each of the ladies, pounding her fist on the table, she thought everyone had gone over to Helena's side. There was no point in her trying to occupy it in any way. Lady Tennessee said, "I'm sorry, Lady Rosaria. She has behaved inappropriately towards her." And Elena replied that it's okay. She's forgiving this time too. Duchy of Rosaria. A few days later, Elena meets her guests at the entrance to the palace. She greets them, saying, "Welcome, Lady Rendor and Lady Chidargi." The girls greeted her as well. Lady Randor said she was very grateful for her invitation, Lady Rosaria, and Lady Settergy said, "Thank you, she is honored." The protagonists of this letter, which came to Helena, came to the Duke's estate. The girls made their way to Helena's private library, settling down on the sofas, where tea and sweets were provided for them on a table. They sat down to have a nice conversation. Elena said the tea came out very flavorful this time. "Drink it quickly before it gets cold." Looking around, Elena asked, "So this is your personal library?" Elena replied, "Yes, she works or studies here most of the time." And Lady Chidargi, looking around, said, "Oh, you know, she has been in many houses, but she has never seen such beautiful rooms as here." The girls sitting nearby began to whisper softly. One said, "I guess all heirs are supposed to have something like this. It's so cool." The other girl said, "That's right. There are so many books here, even more than in their library." At that moment, only Elena was sipping her tea and thinking, "Yes, yes, envy, wonder, admire as much as you like." She didn't cook the treats for nothing. A little earlier, the maid had asked, "My lady, but why bring everything here? Wouldn't it be better to receive the guests in the parlor of the main building?" Helena explained to the maid that in normal times she would have done so, but not today. There was something she wanted to show them. The maid wondered, "Show them what?" Helena then bribed the butler to drop off some document for her to see when they arrived. And so they did. For the moment the girls were sitting, talking sweetly and drinking tea. There was a knock at the door, and the butler opened it. He came in and said, "My lady, I apologize for disturbing you, but this matter requires her consideration." Elena replied, "That's all right. Come this way." And the butler handed the document into her hands. Elena looked at it, and her mood soured. She pointed her finger at something to the butler, and then said it was fine. "Pass what you can. Leave it." The butler bowed, took the papers and said, "My lady." He understood her. Opposite on the sofa sat two friends who saw the whole process. They were fascinated by everything that was going on. When the butler came out, Elena laughed, saying, "I'm sorry. She had to take over some of the Duke's duties. Sorry about that." The girl thought, "I wonder how they like her image as heiress." Lady Randor said, No, it's all right. She looked so serious, didn't she, Lady Cheddargy?" Lady Chadargi said she admired her little sister so much. Elena thought, "Sis? What a strange address she has." Lady Rendor said, "Generally, don't worry. They are only too happy to see her new look." Elena laughed very shyly and said, "Oh, thank you." Elena thought to herself, so they wouldn't stop at just that, but open up more of their desires, something eggs in their hearts. Lady Rendor went on to say that she was correct, however, that Helena was the heiress because of being the Duke's only daughter. And Elena, smiling, thought, "Bullseye. She invited them for a reason, partly because they were the ones who treated her best at the last tea party. But they also have talent and something in common. For example, Rebecca Render, the second child of Earl Render's family. Her lineage has kept the vast number of merchants under control for generations, and the profits from the small businesses she manages are unimaginable in her 15 years. Bella Sadargi, though only 14 years old, born into a baronial family of famous explorers, she possesses an astonishing photographic memory. And what do they have in common? They are in many ways superior to the eldest sons of the heirs of the families. But they always turn a blind eye to the daughters. Why would she think that, Lady Randor? There are no other children in the family besides her. In other cases, the eldest son is usually the heir." Elena replied, "But wasn't the law amended so that other children could become heirs as well?" Rebecca interrupted and said, "It's the old-fashioned way, because not everyone is willing to go against tradition, right?" Rebecca clapped her hands and added, "Oh yes, yes, that's right." Elena continued, "Tradition. That's exactly what she can't stand. If she has the ability, what's stopping her from becoming an heiress by showing her skills? She's proud to take that place." Bella inquired, "So all her misadventures, or rather her tossing about, were due to speculation as to the place of the heir?" Elena confirmed, saying, "Right this way." She remembered how she had been looking for a place to stay when it had become known that a cousin might be the heir to the Rosary family. "It's still embarrassing to remember that," Bella exclaimed. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. If I were in your shoes, I'd do the same thing. The important thing is to realize and change quickly." The girl went on to say that she was a true role model now, wasn't she, Lady Rendor? "Yes, yes, that's right." Elena had not expected such a reaction from them. The girl said that after their words, she was convinced that her efforts were not in vain. Realized that she was very pleased to hear these words. Evening came, and Elena sat by the window, enjoying the beautiful view. Knew that the meeting had gone much better than she'd bargained for. It had completely changed her impression of them. On top of that, her words lit a fire in their hearts. For a moment she remembered how it had been that afternoon, when she had said that she liked people who knew their strengths and used them actively. The girls asked what she meant, and Elena hinted that she would like them to know. She is always ready to help those who want to discover their talents, no matter if they are male or female. Elena got up from her chair and decided to walk around a bit. She realized that although now they didn't fully understand the meaning, they would soon understand everything, and then they should come to her for help. Suddenly there was thunder outside the window, and lightning flashed. Elena turned around and saw that it was raining. She was surprised, because not so long ago it had been sunny, and now it was raining. At the same time, at Earl Render's estate, the whole family gathered around a large table. The father turned to his son and told him to go to the library when he finished eating. The son replied, "Yes, father." Suddenly their silence was interrupted by Rebecca. She said to her father that she wanted to go to the library with her brother. Her brother was surprised and asked what she was talking about. Rebecca made it quite clear that she too wanted to educate herself on how to trade properly, and don't think it's just words. Everyone in the dining room fell silent. They all looked at the girl with surprised eyes. She asked what was wrong with them. What was wrong? Her brother asked her, "She means to say she's going to fight for the place of heir too, doesn't she?" Rebecca explained that she didn't even have that thought. She just wanted to study more and start helping her family. Rebecca's father got up from the table and said as he walked toward the exit that they were sitting so nicely, and she had ruined the whole mood. He had to go. Her brother told her that had she really decided that running a small business was enough to be an heir. Rebecca followed her father and tried to call out to him, saying, "Father," but he didn't turn around. The brother also got up and said he had to go too. Mother replied, "Yes, of course, son." Her brother snatched the papers from Rebecca, gritted his teeth, and threw them at her, telling her to stop doing nonsense. Rebecca picked up and started picking up all her papers from the floor. She got upset and started crying and said, "No, her papers. Why are they doing this to her?" As suddenly Rebecca wanted to pick up one of her documents, but her mother stepped on it. The girl looked up and saw her mother. Mother asked Rebecca Randor, "Tell me honestly, does she really think she can be an heiress because she supposedly understands math better?" Rebecca replied, "Mother, she never wanted to." Mother asked her not to interrupt, whether she meant to or not. "If her greed has no limit, then think hard again about what happened today. We have to get rid of the shop before she does." Rebecca cried, calling her mother, who did not turn to her but left. The girl remained sitting on the floor with her papers. She would like everyone to know. She is always willing to help those who want to discover their talents. I thought back to Helena's words that I'd heard them today. Elena threw her shawl over herself, went to the window, said it was pouring like a bucket, and she wanted to go for a walk in the evening.